Hi, fifth grade. Today we're going to be reading chapter 21 of Lunch Money. You should be on page 187, and this chapter is called The Question of Money. Thursday afternoon was scraping along like a glacier. Greg looked at the clock again. Not even 4 minutes had passed. It was still almost the beginning of fifth periods. Mrs. Calmers was teaching them a new piece of music, and she was working with the sopranos first. Then came the altos, and then finally the tenors would get a turn. At this rate, the school day was going to drag on for another month, maybe two. Tonight was the night of the school committee meeting, and Greg couldn't wait. He was eager to stand up and talk to the grown-ups, a whole crowd of them. He was going to state his case. He might even have an argument. That part was exciting to him. Greg was dying to see what everyone would think about the comic book club. But more than that, Greg wanted the whole thing to be over. Finished, settled one way or the other. He wanted it to be so over so he could think about something else, because for a solid week now, he'd been thinking about nothing but money. And during that week, money had become much more complicated. Until his big blow-up with Maura, and then his run-ins with Mr. Z and Mrs. Davenport, the question of money had been simple for Greg. In fact, he hadn't even been a question. Money was money, money was great. It was good to make it, good to have it, good to save it, and it was always good to want more and more and more of it. Money? Simple. Also, Greg's attitude about money used to be private, until he had started trying to sell chunky comics. Now he made his money, and what he chose to do with it was nobody's business but his. And tonight he was going to have to stand up in public and try to tell all these people why he ought to be allowed to sell his comics and make some money at school. It helped that Maura was in on the deal, and Mr. Z too, but Greg knew they didn't think about money the way he did. They thought he was a nutcase, a money maniac, a moneyac. And tonight, what if everybody else thought so too? And worse than that, what if it was actually true? Greg thought, maybe I really am a greedy little money grubber. Maybe I really don't care about anybody but myself. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Greg Kenton, the greediest, most selfish kid on earth. Greg looked at Mrs. Calmers. She was going over and over the same 16 notes with the sopranos, smiling, nodding, playing the piano, and singing along. It looked like hard work. And I know she doesn't make a lot of money, he thought. None of my teachers do. And that reminded Greg of his conversation with Mr. Z about other jobs. Greg knew Mr. Z could be making tons more money if he worked for a lab or an engineering company, but instead he was a math teacher. And that thing he'd said about his brother, the low-paid doctor, for him, enough is enough. And ever since that conversation, Greg had thought about Mr. Z's toilet theory, at least 4 times a day. And 3 days ago, Greg had heard on the evening news that Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, was giving away another $375 million for education in Africa. Super rich and giving his money away. And in the same news story, they told how Ted Turner, the man who started CNN, had given $1 billion to the United Nations. $1 billion. Money thoughts had been following him everywhere, around the school, onto the soccer field, across town to his home, even into the bathroom. Greg couldn't get away from them. But if this slow-motion school day would ever end, and if tonight's school meeting would ever arrive, maybe that could change. And that's the end of chapter 21.